We've got to make another one of these, but big enough so I can put my laptop on it. Okay. Tonight we begin studying the book of Proverbs. And in tonight's lesson, we're going to cover some introductory things very briefly. And then we're going to get into the root or the principal part of wisdom, which is the fear of the Lord. And so hopefully we'll get through all of this tonight. That's not what I wanted to do. Okay, let me get the right button here. All right. The theme or the what Proverbs is all about is it's about wisdom. So, well, what is wisdom? Wisdom is used differently in the scriptures. We'll see as we study the book of Proverbs that wisdom is what God used in creation. Wisdom is personified several times through the scriptures. And wisdom is personified as a woman, and she speaks. And then she talks about herself. And she says, I was with the Creator in the beginning. I was with the Lord in the beginning, in His hand as He created. Wisdom is used in Scripture to describe the skill that a craftsman has. And so when you see a craftsman working skillfully with his hands, you're seeing wisdom in his hands. And so when we talk about wisdom, we're talking about skillfully living or the ability to skillfully live a godly life in an ungodly world, because wisdom is contrasted with folly and simplicity and sin and wickedness throughout the book of Proverbs. And that's not an easy thing to do. It just doesn't come naturally to live rightly in a sinful world, in a world full of evil and wickedness. Wisdom is the ability to make right decisions, but right decisions based on God's standard. It's to be able to look at a moral dilemma and to discern what is right and what is wrong. And so the book of Proverbs teaches us that. Now, the aim of the book, what the book is driving at, is that it will teach wisdom to anyone who will learn. Anyone who's willing to learn. We're going to see that it's primarily written to the youth. Solomon uses the address "my son" often in the book of Proverbs. So, and really, it would be a really good practice. And I regret that I did not spend more time with Proverbs in my youth, and that I did not spend more time with my children in their younger years with the book of Proverbs. But you just think of how young people today would be affected positively if their parents would instill in them the wisdom from the book of Proverbs. So it's helpful for anyone, but it will have a more profound effect on a person's life if they will apply it early on in life. Because if you apply wisdom and learn wisdom early on in life, then you'll not make the mistakes that come from folly and being a simpleton and foolishness. And so it is driving at teaching wisdom. Now the key verses are chapter 1, verses 5 to 7. Now, what happened up there? It disappeared on me. Proverbs chapter 1, verses 5 to 7 is one of the key texts. A wise man will hear and increase in learning, And a man of understanding will attain wise counsel, to understand a proverb and an enigma, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. And so a wise man, we're going to see this contrast several times in the book of Proverbs. A wise man will listen and learn. A foolish man is often shown, or he often shows himself to be foolish because he talks too much. And he's just always talking, and you can say something, and before you even finish your sentence, he's already saying something back to you because he already knows everything. And so he's smarter than everybody else. But so he thinks, but he's actually a fool because he despises wisdom and instruction. He won't hear, he won't listen, he won't learn. Now, why won't he listen? Why won't he learn? Because he has no fear of the Lord. Which we're going to talk about a good bit tonight. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not on thine own understanding. What does the fool do? He leans on his own understanding. I already know. You know, I've been through college and I've been through graduate school and I have these degrees and I already know everything. But the wise man does not lean on his own understanding, but he acknowledges the Lord in all his ways, and the Lord then directs his path. That is, everywhere he goes, he asks this question: what would the Lord have me to do here? What is the Lord's will in this situation? In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. And so God's teaching, God's wisdom applies to all of my life. In all thy ways acknowledge him. Now, what is a proverb? Well, I'm going to give you a couple of sayings here, a couple of definitions, and you can maybe come up with your own. But generally speaking, a proverb is a truth that is generally true in most situations. A proverb, generically speaking, is a general truth that is generally true. Now, there may be exceptions. There are some proverbs, we might even say many proverbs, to which there are no exceptions. For instance, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Well, there's no exception to that. I mean, that's an absolute truth. But, for example, Proverbs 10 and verse 27. The fear of the Lord prolongeth days, but the years of the wicked shall be shortened. So generally speaking, those that fear the Lord can look for length of days. Those who do not fear the Lord can look to have shortened days. Now, is that absolutely true all the time? Well, no. But we can see that as a general truth, or we can see that as something to aspire to. But there are some truths to which there are no acceptance. Proverbs 1 and verse 7, as we mentioned. Proverbs 6 and verse 23. The commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life. That's absolutely true. That's always true. There are no exceptions to it. Now, as we look at the book of Proverbs, we see that generally speaking, Solomon authored the Proverbs. However, the last two, he did not. And he did not assemble all of the Proverbs. And all of the Proverbs of Solomon are not in the book of Proverbs. But generally speaking, Solomon authored the large majority of them. And in chapter 30, We see in chapter 30 and verse 1 the mention there of a man named Agur, A-G-U-R. And then in Proverbs 31, which contains the virtuous woman, the text on the virtuous woman, that was written by a man named King Lemuel. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Lemuel. Now, there is a section of Proverbs that was assembled by Hezekiah. That's chapter 25 to 29. And chapter 25 and verse 1 says, "These are also the Proverbs of Solomon." So Solomon wrote them, but they were assembled together and collected by the men of Hezekiah, who copied them and collected them. Question number 7 on your outline, I think I already answered, but anyone may profit from the book of Proverbs, but as it is written, it really is intended to be taught to the young. And so, as I think about this, particularly as one of the elders in the congregation, this is something that a congregation should focus on if they have an education program, they should include this in their education program. It certainly should be included in the family's home education program. Now, there's 31 chapters. Now, if you learn nothing else in our study of the book of Proverbs, learn this. These 3 words. Well, I'll narrow it down to 2 words. Read Proverbs. Read the book of Proverbs. Now, there are 31 chapters, and you can read most of the chapters in just a few minutes. So it's a pretty good practice to just read one a day. What's today's date? The 4th, okay? So that tells me Proverbs chapter 4. And so that's easy to remember, and that's a great program that we should just adopt and apply for the rest of our lives. Just whatever the day of the month it is. If it's just 30 days in the month, well, on the 30th day, then you have the drudgery of having to read 2 chapters, 30 and 31. So we'll not get into talking about leap year, but whatever the case, read the Proverbs. That's what they're there for. And as we read them repeatedly and, commit them to memory, particularly ones that apply to a situation that you're dealing with. Now, any questions on your outline there up through question number 8? Comments or observations? All right, let's look at verse 7 again. "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction." The principal part, or the beginning, or the foundation, or the starting point, whatever you want to say, however you want to understand it, the beginning of wisdom is what? The fear of the Lord. Now, what does that mean when we talk about the fear of the Lord? It is godliness. This is what godliness means as the word is used in Scripture. It is to hold God in reverence. It is to hold God in awe. When we sing, "Our God is an awesome God," that's what it means to fear the Lord. He is awesome. And so we need to hold him in great reverence and be awestruck before him. Proverbs 9 and verse 10. "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the holy is understanding." So if you want to begin on the path toward wisdom, knowledge, understanding, the beginning point is to fear the Lord. Now, that automatically tells us a lot about most of our institutions of higher learning and even elementary, middle school, and high schools today. What does that tell us about most of those institutions? Is there wisdom there? No. Because generally speaking, there is no fear of the Lord there. So when it comes to wisdom for living and making right choices in life, are children, young people, young adults, are they going to get that from secular institutions? No. Well, they may learn technicalities of things. Technically, how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, do simple and advanced algebra and geometry, what have you. They can learn facts, but will they learn principles that will help guide them in their life? If that institution is not characterized by godly fear, then no, they're not going to learn those things. A person may have a PhD, may have advanced degrees in any field, but that does not mean the person is wise. It means they've acquired an acceptable, they've accumulated a body of knowledge, but that does not mean that they have the ability to make right decisions in life. And so to make right decisions in life, to gain knowledge and understanding, you must begin with a fear of the Lord. Job chapter 28 and verse 28, unto man he said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. To depart from evil is understanding. Psalm 111 and verse 10, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, a good understanding. Have all they that do his commandments, his praise endureth forever. And Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes says this. He said, let's hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Now the whole matter is life. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Or this is man's purpose in life. So man's purpose in life begins with fearing God and keeping his commandments. So the foundation of wisdom is fearing God. Now, why does Solomon make such an emphasis upon this? Well, we see in our own day, but not just our own day, throughout the history of mankind. Generally speaking, has there existed fear of God or godliness in the world among men? No. What is it in man that opposes or prevents the fear of God? Pride. Exactly right. It's human pride. It's arrogance. It's haughtiness. You can see this not only when it comes to the fear of the Lord, but you can just see it in anyone that refuses to listen, that refuses to learn. I don't know if the terminology is used, here in this part of the country, but when I was working in South Georgia building houses, if you had a person on the crew that was kind of a know-it-all and was proud, arrogant, we had I don't mean to speak bad of people from up north, but we had a fella from New York that he lasted about 2 days on our crew. But he just knew everything, and every time we did something, he said, that ain't the way we do it up north. And the supervisors at lunchtime, the fella had left to go get his lunch or whatever, and he spit out some tobacco juice and said, you can't tell him nothing. What does he mean when he said, you can't tell him anything? Well, he already knows everything. You can't tell him anything. We have a comedian we like to watch sometimes, a Christian comedian, And he's talking about teenagers. And he says, I don't know how old Satan was when he rebelled in heaven, but he says, I'm guessing it was about 15. And he says, have you ever met a 15-year-old that didn't already know everything? He said, I called up NASA one day and said, come get this kid. He knows everything. He, better hurry because I'm about to send him into orbit without a suit. It was all of this we say about people who are very proud and very arrogant and haughty. You can't tell them anything. And we look at that and we joke and we laugh. But, there is a sense in which even a person who has a facade of humility, they can be stuck on something and refuse to listen, refuse to learn, refuse to move from their position to receive instruction from the Lord. And it's all rooted in human pride. Proverbs 3 and verse 7, be not wise in thine own eyes. Be not wise in thy own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. So don't think that you know it all. Proverbs 8 and verse 13. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogancy, and the evil way, and the froward mouth do I hate. Proverbs 15 and verse 33. The fear of the Lord is the instruction of wisdom, and before honor is what? Humility. And so if pride prevents wisdom, what character trait promotes wisdom? Humility. Humility. Proverbs 22 and verse 4. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. Now, let's develop this a little bit further. We say, well, pride prevents wisdom. And why is that? Well, it's very simply, he already thinks he knows everything. Or he may deep down realize that he doesn't know, but he just refuses to admit it and wants to stay in his own way. Proverbs 1:24 and 25. Because here wisdom is personified. Because I have called and you refused. I've stretched out my hand and no man regarded. This is wisdom speaking. Saying, I called out to you and you refused. I stretched out my hand and no man regarded it. You set at naught all my counsel. So counsel here is instruction. Here's how you do this. Here's what you should do. Here's what you should not do. Avoid this. Hold on to that. You refuse my counsel, and then you also would have none of my reproof. You would none of my reproof. And so I make a mistake here. And wisdom says, don't do this. Well, I do that. Well, wisdom is patient and merciful, and so there's reproof from the Lord. Don't touch that hot stove. You'll get burned. And you touch the hot stove, what does you burn? Well, it's a reproof. So metaphorically, when we go out here and do something we ought not, something that is foolish, and we receive the consequences of it, then that is a reproof. And so we should learn from that. And we should adjust our behavior. Change our mind about something. Proverbs 1 and verse 30. They would none of my counsel. They despise my reproof. Proverbs 1, 32 and 33. For the turning away of the simple shall slay them, and the prosperity of fools shall destroy them. But whoso hearkeneth unto me shall dwell safely, and shall be quiet from fear of evil. I think I'm going to turn this light on since the overhead's not working. I know it doesn't affect you much, but it helps me see better. Oh yeah, that little bit of light just makes a big difference. Okay. Proverbs 26 and verse 12. Seest thou a man wise in his own conceit? So here's a man who thinks he's wise. He's really a fool, but he thinks he's wise. Wise in his own conceit. He says there's more hope for a fool than him. And we know what we're going to see what Solomon has to say, about fools. But he says there's more hope for a fool than for a man who thinks that he's wise. Now, ultimately, as we see in verse 28 and 29, really the broader context there, destruction awaits the fool. If we do not develop godliness, if we do not develop a healthy fear of God and the corresponding humility and willingness to learn, willingness to receive instruction, willingness to admit we don't know, to just take a truth on face value. Sometimes, I remember when I was young and my dad or an older, wiser person would say to me about something, they'd say, don't go there. I was 21, I remember, and I bought a 65 Mustang. And that thing would run, it was fast. And I had about a 30-mile drive in South Georgia, North Florida, across the border there, to work every day. And it was a long, straight, flat road. And I wanted that thing. I'm telling you, it had a 5-speed, and I got it. And before I got it, the man I was working for, he said, don't buy that car. I said, why? He says, because you're 21. I thought. And I'm telling you, I would hit that thing in Valdosta, Georgia, and I would open it up, and I've got some speeding tickets, and probably amazing I didn't get put in jail as fast as I would drive that thing. But that's foolish. And they were right. Don't buy that thing. I should have went out and bought a station wagon or something. Minivan. Don't do that. Well, I understand that now. Matthew has been able to save up some money, and he was looking on Craigslist at cars the other day, and he said, hey, Dad. He said, look at this. And it was, I'm telling you, I've been wanting one of these things. It was one of those Smokey and the Bandit Trans Ams. He says, let's get that thing. I said, no. He says, why? I said, when you're married, you'll understand. But that wouldn't be wise. Okay. So, and I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know, well, why is that not wise? Because you're 21. Well, I was a fool. Okay. And a fool will not just take something from an older, wiser person. Because, the young fool looks at the older and wiser and says, he's an old fool. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And so, but a young, wise man says, he's older, he's wiser. I don't understand why, well, you're 21. Well, what's that have to do with it? But I'm just going to take his word for it, and I'm not going to buy that car. And then as I grow in wisdom, you see, I take his word for it at the front end, but as I grow, eventually I learn. That's why. Okay? It's so frustrating sometimes to say to someone who's a fool, whether they're young or old, because you know that the decision they're making is bad. And you know where it's heading. But a foolish person says, well, I'm going to do my own thing. That old fool doesn't know what he's talking about. And here again, there's reproof. And fortunately, with many folks, they're reproved from being a fool. And they're brought to being wise, at least to a degree. So, There are some, however, that ultimately wallow in the ruin of their destruction. And they're foolish, and they're going to die foolish. Young or old. This is what I'm going to do. I have set my mind on it, and I don't care what God says. This is what I'm going to do. And then there comes destruction. And in Proverbs 19 and verse 13, Solomon says, the foolish man perverts his way. That is, he lays out his way. Foolish man here, he makes his decision and he lays out his way. This is what I'm going to do. This is my decision. But he perverts himself. He's laying out a path to destruction. That's what he means here when he says he perverts his way. He thinks in his mind at the time when he lays it out, he's going to prosperity, or he thinks that he's going to benefit from this decision. But he's just perverting himself. And his heart fretteth against the Lord, King James Version. His heart fretteth against the Lord. That word fretteth comes from a Hebrew word which means to boil up. Okay? So, he lays out his path, and he gets down to the end of it, and everything he's planned now is frustrated, and it's failed. And it's basically this house that he has built up has just lays in ruins, whatever it may be. But does he take reproof? Does he look at that and say, maybe I did something wrong back there. Maybe that was a bad decision. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. No. His heart boils up against the Lord. This is the person who makes a bad decision in life and then blames God for it. They make a bad decision. Here you have a woman or a young girl who's foolish, and she marries a bad man who's lazy, who is violent, and then he ends up maybe being violent toward her, maybe leaving her for another woman, and then she gets down to the end of that and she says, why is God treating me this way? What did I ever do to God? It's a bad decision from the get-go. And now your heart frets against the Lord, boils up against the Lord. Same thing with a fella. Don't get messed up with that girl. She's trouble. And so, if it goes badly, the only person to blame is myself. When I make a boneheaded decision because I'm being foolish and I'm refusing reproof, I'm refusing instruction, I'm just going to do my own thing my own way and don't tell me what to do, and then it all falls apart, the only person I can blame is myself for that. Proverbs 1:20 and 24. Wisdom crieth without. She uttereth her voice in the streets. She crieth in the chief place of concourse. In the openings of the gates in the city she uttereth her words, saying, how long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? A simple one is someone who's just a simple one, a simpleton. It's just a person who's just silly, I guess, is another way to describe them. Silly person or a simpleton, someone who's not serious in life. Everything's a game, everything's a joke. She says, wisdom is saying, how long, you simple ones, will you love simplicity? And the scorners delight in their scorning. The scorners are those who reject God. They reject the truth that there actually is someone in the world that might know more than they do. Fools hate knowledge. Turn you at my reproof. Behold, I will pour out my spirit unto you. I will make known my words unto you. Because I have called and you refuse, I have stretched out my hand and no man regard. And it goes on to say, I'm going to laugh at your calamity. Now, Well, nobody told me. Oh, yeah. Look at how wisdom is personified here. It's like there's a busy street, or if maybe you've gone in the mall or some shopping center somewhere where there's lots of people and there's lots of bustling. It's like a busy street or a concourse where there's a lot of people. And then this woman stands up and she says, listen to me, all you simple ones. And she says, here's wisdom. Here's wisdom. Come and take it. It's here for the taking if you'll receive it. And everybody just says, I don't want to hear anything that wisdom has to say. I called and you refused. I stretched out my hand. Here's wisdom. And no one regarded. And so if a person then suffers the consequences of foolishness, making foolish decisions in life, who can they blame? Not God. They can just blame themselves because they didn't listen to wise counsel. And so what we need to be focusing on in this study is listening. Listening to what God has to say, and taking the wisdom and growing in wisdom. Let me look here and see if I've look at verse 25. You disdained all my counsel. You would have none of my reproof. I will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your terror comes. When your terror comes like a storm and your destruction comes like a whirlwind. When distress and anguish come upon you, then they will call me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but they will not find me. And it's not because wisdom's not available. It was on there's plenty on the shelves yesterday, but now all the shelves are cleared off. No. It's because they still are so foolish and so hard-headed that they won't go to wisdom. Or they might just say, well, it's just too late. There's no use in it, and that's sad as well. They hated knowledge, did not choose the fear of the Lord. They would have none of my counsel. They despised all of my reproof. Now, as we look at the fear of the Lord, we see that there are some blessings that come with having the fear of the Lord. And there are also some moral virtues that accompany the fear of the Lord. For example, one who fears the Lord hates evil and departs from evil. So I sit down here and I examine my life. Here we are, we're beginning this study in Proverbs, and I say, well, I would like to have wisdom. I would like to have the comfort and the peace that goes along with wisdom. And so I need to examine my life. So what's my attitude toward evil? What's my attitude toward wickedness? Do I look at it and I just say, I sure wish I could do that, but I'm a Christian, I guess I can't. Or is my attitude one of abhorrence? And it's not something I really like that I wish I could have, but because I'm a Christian and, we're supposed to be all sour and dour, then I can't do all that fun stuff. Well, that's not an attitude that leads to wisdom, because that's not an attitude that hates evil. Proverbs 3 and verse 7, be not wise in thine own eyes, fear the Lord, and depart from evil. Wisdom sees evil for what it is. Wisdom is able to look at that which Satan puts up and says, this is appealing. Solomon has a lot to say about the seductress and adultery. And, the seductress puts up a very appealing invitation. But the wise man sees it for what it is and runs away from her. He doesn't, cast his eyes upon her longingly, rubbing his hands together, say, oh, I wish I could, but I better not. No, he sees her for what she is and hates evil and runs away from it. And so this is wisdom. He hates evil. Proverbs 8 verse 13, the fear of the Lord is to hate evil, pride and arrogancy, and the evil way, and the froward mouth do I hate. And so what are those evils? Some of those evils that we are to hate. Well, pride and arrogancy. Number one, because they prevent wisdom. They prevent the fear of the Lord. Proverbs 14 verse 2. He that walks in his uprightness fears the Lord. And so to fear the Lord is to walk in uprightness. That is moral uprightness. Proverbs 16 and verse 6. By mercy and truth iniquity is purged, and by the fear of the Lord men depart from evil. Proverbs 23, 17 and 18. Let not thine heart envy sinners. Don't look at sinners and say, they're having such a good time over there, I wish I could too. But be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long. For surely there is an end, and thine expectation shall not be cut off. That is, the Lord is going to grant you your hope. And if what you're hoping for is joy and comfort, peace, contentment, there's an end to that. God's going to give that to you. But you can't have that and at the same time look at sinners and say, oh, they're having such a good time, I wish I could do that. No, the wise man says, no, the Lord is going to bless me with the happiness that I think is over here, but it's not really happiness. It's just a facade of happiness. But the Lord is going to bless me with true happiness. There's an end to my expectation, to my hopes. Some other moral virtues that go along with godly fear is we've already mentioned moral uprightness, chapter 14, verse 2. Benevolence is one. Generosity. Proverbs 14, verse 31. He that oppresseth the poor reproaches his maker, but he that honoreth him, that is, honors his maker, has mercy on the poor. And so one of the traits of honoring our maker, which is fearing the Lord, is being benevolent to those who are in need. Contentment, that is a sense of peace, a sense of rest. Proverbs 15 and verse 16. Better is little with the fear of the Lord than great treasure and trouble therewith. And so maybe I don't have great treasure, but I have the fear of the Lord, and I have a little, I have what I need, and so I have contentment there. He also, chapter 16 verse 3, he has trust. He has faith in the Lord. That is, he trusts that the Lord is going to work out the Lord's purpose in his life. Commit thy works unto the Lord, and thy thoughts shall be established. Or the American Standard Version says, commit thy works unto Jehovah, and thy purposes shall be established. And then finally, there are some blessings that I think contentment probably could be we could list here as a blessing as well. A long life, Proverbs 10 verse 27 and 14, 26 and 27. Happiness, Proverbs 16 verse 20. He that handleth a matter wisely shall find good, and whoso trusteth in the Lord, happy is he. Security, that is a sense of a feeling of safety. Proverbs 19 verse 23. The fear of the Lord tendeth to life, and he that hath it shall abide satisfied. He shall not be visited with evil. And then wealth and honor come to those who fear the Lord. By humility and the fear of the Lord are riches and honor and life. And Proverbs 31, verses 30 and 31, this is having to do with the virtuous woman. Notice what it says here of her. Favor is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord, she shall be praised. And so a God-fearing woman here shall be praised. She'll receive honor. And so that is one of the blessings of fearing the Lord. Now, we're out of time. Next week, our lesson is the cry or the call of wisdom. And this is going to, really we're going to look at several passages in chapters 1 to 9. And that's a lot of what chapters 1 to 9 is about. It talks about why you should pursue wisdom and what happens to you when you don't pursue wisdom. And so here again, it's like the woman here on the concourse or on the busy street crying out, here's wisdom, here's wisdom. Well, okay, why should I come to you? Why should I receive you, wisdom, in my life? And so Solomon goes through, particularly in many instances through these first 9 chapters, and he says, here's what wisdom tends to. Here's what wisdom leads to. And here's where you'll end up if you're a fool, if you reject wisdom. And so next week will be wisdom, or the cry of wisdom, or wisdom crieth aloud. And then a lot of what we will be studying this quarter will be topical. That is, we will see what wisdom has to say about the marriage relationship, about finances, about self-discipline, things like this. And we'll have a lot of lessons that are just topically or centered around a topic and God's wisdom in that particular area of life. Okay, thank you for coming. We'll see you Sunday morning.